All right, now that we are probably all thoroughly confused about how to divide by and into fractions, I'm going to hopefully take the next video here, guys, to kind of clean that up or make it a little bit more understandable or break it down a little bit simpler for you. The couple of things that I really need you to keep in mind is think about the order in which the numbers are being written. The long division that I showed you, that was just a connection piece. I definitely wouldn't use the long division writing of these problems or writing these problems out in a long division format because putting a fraction underneath a fraction bar doesn't make a lot of sense, right? That doesn't make, I think that's why that makes it a little bit more confusing. So as I look at this, I'm going to keep it in these formats moving forward, all right? So I'm going to look at problem number 7 here and try to make it as simple as I can. This was the example that they gave us earlier that said, smaller number being divided by a larger number, 3 divided by 4, okay? In normal circumstances, before we started understanding what fractions were and how we'd make that happen, that would be a problem that'd be really, really difficult for us to solve. And in some cases, your elementary teachers might say, that's impossible, we can't do it, it's written in the wrong way. Now that we're figuring out fractions, we will see that what we're actually doing is we are multiplying by the opposite of 4, and in that case, the opposite of 4, remember 4 as a fraction is 4 over 1, and the opposite of that then, the reciprocal, would be 1 over 4. So that's going to be the same thing, and all they're looking for in this first little section of 6 questions here, guys, is trying to get you to understand how the division is just doing multiplication of the opposite, multiplying by the reciprocal or multiplying by the opposite number. But again, order is extremely important. We should be on page 149, by the way, if you're not there. Just the next page after the last video wrapped up. So now we're going back to 8, which is a very similar question to what we normally do, a larger number divided by a smaller whole number, okay, 10 divided by 2. We know the answer is 5, but we want to put it into terms of what does it actually mean? What is another way of saying this? Division in this way is the same as multiplying by the opposite. So the back number, the divisor, okay, is always going to flip. That's the one that flips. Don't do anything to the 10, but I would say that it is the same thing as multiplying by a half. And here's the easiest one I can prove this to you on, I think, because it makes the most sense. We all know, like I said, that 10 divided by 2 would equal 5. All right? And if I look at what is half of 10, or 10 divided in half, it is also 5. So we are getting to the same answer. And in the problem like that, they're just trying to show us that it doesn't really matter which form of division, if it's dividing by just whole numbers, dividing by a fraction, dividing into a fraction, the process is the same no matter what we're working with here. So looking at question 9, we've got the fraction first, which means we need to change the back number. To change the back number, we need to assume or imagine that it is already in fractional form. So that is not just a 5, it is a 5 over 1. 1/6 divided by 5 is the same thing as 1/6 times the reciprocal or the opposite of 5, which is 1/5, flipping the numerator and the denominator around. Okay, same thing here. We've got the fraction first, so 1/3 divided by 8, which is actually 8 over 1, would be the same thing as 1/3 times 1/8. And we're not actually solving it here right now. We're just setting these problems up and getting us to understand how we would set this up. Now here again is the last example I'm going to give you where the whole number is first and the fraction is second. Okay, we again can think that that 4 is 4 over 1, because that will help us in the long run when we get to our actual answer here. But like I said, we don't need to put the 1 underneath it. It just helps us to maybe visualize it and think about it. What is the opposite of 1/9 or 1 over 9? The opposite of that would be multiplying by 9 or multiplying by 9 over 1 if I wanted to physically see that I'm changing the fraction to its reciprocal. All right? So last one here, 7 divided by a half is the same thing as 7 times 2 or 7 times 2 over 1. However you best want to look at that. So that's the case where if we're dividing by a fraction, our number is actually going to get larger, which is just kind of a weird concept to think about. All right, so I'm going to only go through a handful. I want to make sure I hit a couple of different examples here going through. And so I make sure I get one of each kind of scenario. It doesn't look like, as I'm looking at the page here, that there are any examples of normal division. They're all ones that are either going to have a quotient that ends up as a fraction, or that end up with fractions as the dividend or the divisor. Okay? And I am going to continue to walk us through this process just to get us to understand. All right? So if we are dividing 5 by 7, 5 divided by 7 for number 13, okay? Remember that we want that back number to be represented as a fraction. All right? We can still represent the front number, but we're just not going to flip it. We're not going to reciprocate that one. Okay? So this is the same thing, and I'm going to write the problem out here as a whole. Same thing as 5 over 1 times 1 over 7, which will eventually get me to an answer of 5 over 7. A shortcut for that one, if I see that it's two whole numbers and a small number is in front, it simply becomes 7 divided by 5. Remember that fraction bar doubles as a division symbol. So that if I see the division symbol between it, I just need to put them in the order I see them. 5 over 7, or 5 divided by 7. All right. Moving across, now we've got that fraction in front, and we're going to divide it by a whole number. Okay? We're not changing the fraction. This fraction is going to stay exactly the same. The number we are going to change is the back number. Okay, so 1/4 times 2, or excuse me, 1/4 divided by 2 is the same thing as 1/4 times 1/2. Multiplying by the opposite, multiplying by the reciprocal, and our answer for that one would end up as 1/8 for our answer. Okay, so this is, and again, I'm showing the work right on the line as well, but we are just more solving at this point. All right. Problem number 15. Again, we've got our whole number in front. I technically don't need to put a 1 underneath it, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to show you that if I multiply by the opposite, what is the opposite of 1/2? That is 2 over 1, or the same thing as 2. So 8 times 2 in this case, or 2 over 1, is 16. Okay, so our answer for number 15 should be 16. I think one more round, one more layer of fractions here. We've got an example of each of them in the next row here, 16, 17, and 18. And then by all means, guys, if you are wanting to practice more, you've got a whole sheet here that can do. I do want to get into some story problems so we can really wrap our mind around what we're doing and trying to put it into story problems, because that's a whole other layer. All right, so this first one here, again, we're seeing the division symbol. 1/3 divided by 6 needs to be the same thing as 1/3 times 1/6, which would equal 1/18. All right, so multiplying by the opposite or multiplying by the reciprocal, I want to make sure you hear that. Now this is the example. 17 is very much like the first example. If I want to take the shortcut and realize that I am dividing two whole numbers, it is 9 divided by 10. I could just simply go with that, or I can show you why I'm doing that, which would mean the same thing as 9 times 1 over 10. And if I do that, it would become the same answer, 9/10. All right. And then the last one here is this example before I switch to our story problem examples, just so we can really try to wrap our minds around. I guess it's, a couple story problem ones, and then also a puzzle penguin problem I really want to get to by the end of this video. And this last one here, again, is an example like the one right above it here, where we've got the whole number in front and we're dividing it by a fraction. We're dividing it, breaking that whole number into more pieces, which is going to actually make our number larger. This is going to be the same thing as 7 times the opposite of 1/9, which is 9. So my answer is going to be 63, which is just odd to think about. I'm dividing 7 and ending up with dividing into 7 and getting an answer that's so large as 63. All right, I'm going to jump a page ahead here and start looking at question 34 here, and try to wrap our minds around how we are going to set this problem up and what we are actually looking for an answer. So it says, Greenie the grasshopper hopped 3 meters in the length of time it took Tiny the ant to crawl 1/5 of a meter. Greenie hopped about how many times as far as Tiny crawled? Okay, so how are we going to set this problem up here? Okay, we are looking at 3 meters, okay, divided by the 1/5 that it took for Tiny the ant to crawl, and that will give us the times difference, the how many times larger it is than we had here. Well, what is dividing by that fraction going to look like? It actually means the same thing as 3 broken into 5 separate pieces. Every time the grasshopper hopped 1 meter, Tiny the ant crawled 5 meters. So 3 of those is going to be 3 broken into 5 groups, which gets me to an answer of 15 times as much. All right, or 15 times as much as the other one. All right. All right. And the puzzle penguin problem. Oops. Got to switch this here. Again, puzzle penguin struggling with his math. Says the problem below was marked wrong on my math quiz. So he's got 1/3 divided by 4 is the same thing as 3 over 1 times 4. 3 over 1 times 4 over 1 gets me to 12 over 1 for an answer of 12. Can you describe my mistake and explain how I can find the correct quotient? Thank you. I'm going to pause here for just about 5 to 10 seconds, get you to kind of look at that problem again before I give you a suggestion. The thing I want you to focus on is I'd like you to look at what changed. What did Puzzle Penguin change? The front number or the back number? I think Puzzle Penguin saw a fraction and he saw a whole number. So he automatically knew he needed to multiply by a reciprocal of a fraction, so he flipped the fraction, even though that fraction was in front. And I've stated through both of these videos, we really need to focus on the order of these numbers. The front number will always stay the same. It's going to stay. So instead of it becoming 1/3 divided by 4 is 3 over 1, that 1/3 needs to stay the same, and we need to multiply by the opposite of 4. So in this case, instead of multiplying it by 4, we're going to multiply it by 1/4, which would get us to the exact opposite answer that Puzzle Penguin ended up with. He should have ended up with 1 over 12, or 1/12 versus 12. Very big difference in those answers. All right. All right, there will be an exit ticket on lesson, or an assignment on lesson 311. And so please make sure that you're getting in there and attempting that. If you have questions, guys, this is a tricky unit. I know I will expect questions from my students moving forward. Hopefully you are all attending the live lessons as well, and this is just an extra tutorial. But please ask questions if you have them.